So, of course, we continue to reinforce academic vocabulary with our word walls, sentence starters, close activities, all those things that you use with your ELD students. You want to continue, with your ESL students in ESL programs, you want to continue with the ELD program. And you just want to build on that. So, dual language dictionaries. If the child does have some first language literacy skills, you can still use those resources, dual language books. And Google Translate, I just put this phrase in, even just teaching the kids that simple sentence, what is this book about, and spending some time teaching that, so that whatever resource you give them, at least you have a sentence they understand and you can assess their comprehension. And then you can give them the really simple sentence starter like this book is about, and even a word bank, and they can just choose what word fits there. At least that's showing you that they're reflecting on the book and thinking about the comprehension, and it's not just about decoding the words. With Bana and Amira, with Amira we're able to use Google Translate to a certain extent, but the typed one on the computer, but not as much as we'd like to, and Bana isn't able to use it at all. So what we are using is the iPads. If you use Google Translate on an iPad, this works for Arabic, not all languages, but Arabic is a pretty major language, so there's a lot of resources for Arabic. You can actually speak very slowly and clearly into the iPad, and it will translate what you say back into Arabic. And when you speak, it does write it out in English, so you can see if it picked up a mistake from your voice, and then it can communicate to the child. So if you don't have access to a translator, which is even better, it's better to use student translators, have community people come in. But if you don't, if that's not a reality in your situation, you can use the iPads to communicate with the children. And of course, picture dictionaries. Higher level thinking. So I'm going to talk about how you can teach some decoding and teach a student how to read for the first time when they're in grade 7. We'll talk about some of those strategies. But try to always think about how you can get them to access the curriculum and access higher level thinking as well. That's where the challenge is, and it's exciting, and you're going to have to really change how you approach teaching and be very creative, which is fun. So here I'm working through the writing process with Amira. The students, when she arrived, were doing instructions. They were learning to write instructions in different formats, which was great because I could teach her the writing process and go through how to do the writing process with a writing form that's quite simple, but at least I'm introducing her to different types of text forms. So she's learning about instructions, which is something that is going to be personally relevant to her. Instructions are something that everyone has to read and know how to read in the real world. And then the other texts we worked on was identity text, autobiography, these type of things which are really personal and relevant. At least you're teaching about different types of text forms and you're introducing the writing process to the students. So we actually went online with all the different kids and looked at, they were so excited to look at different pictures of food from, their different traditions. But most of them wanted to write about hamburgers and pizza for their recipes. So that was the choice they made. It made it easier for me to help her because I know how to make pizza. But what I did is I taught them a bunch of action words like slice, chop, cut. So we pre-taught some vocabulary, built it up. You can teach them about verbs and nouns. So they're learning some grammar there. Action verbs, and the use of the imperative, which is it's a command, right? It's an instruction. So you don't have the subject at the beginning. You just start with the verb, and then there's a noun afterwards. So you can see she used her first language quite a bit, and we kind of worked together on translating that and putting it together. And on the previous slide, you can see she has typed it into into a talking word processor. It's called Kurzweil. That's the one that's being used in Ontario right now, thanks to EQAO. So they kind of determine what we use. But It is just, talking word processors are great. It's just like Word, except for when you type a word, it reads it back to you. So it's a support in that way. And here you can see she has her dual language picture dictionary. So I said to her, there's a lot of new words you learned here, so I wanted her to add them to her reinforcing vocabulary book, which is English, Arabic, and then she draws a picture of the word. Sometimes she doesn't know the word in Arabic, so she's got the picture, something to relate it to. So she's adding to her dictionary there. I also, in terms of the grammar piece, when we kind of got to the end, we did a little bit of proofreading around the use of capitals and understanding the difference between the lower and uppercase, because that was kind of new learning for her. Another unit I did, we were talking about poetry, all of the grade 6s. So I love this poem. It's when I was teaching in England with my grade 10 and 11 students, we read this poem, but I find that my grade 6 ELLs, they can all like read and understand this poem, even though it's like a high school poem, because it's connected to their prior experiences, and it's something that they can relate to. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about how you can use leveled readers with students in ELD programs, but generally speaking with students in ESL programs, you don't necessarily want to say this is the level of reading the student has. It depends what the text is. If it's a text that's connected to their prior knowledge that they can connect to, they're going to be able to read something at a much higher level. So we had some great discussions around language and how, metaphor. We kind of got into metaphor. We actually spent quite a bit of time talking about metaphor. And in the video I showed you earlier, you probably saw that Vanna was using a metaphor in her home. But you can see there's lots of dual language poetry out there that you can have access to and just find on the internet. So in order to teach metaphor to the students, we use the gradual release process. Are you learning about gradual release? No, okay. So I'll briefly go through it, but gradual release is important to use with probably any classroom, but if you have English language learners in your class, it's necessary. So you don't just say, okay, everyone, let's write a poem. You give them the project, give them the handouts. That might work in some schools, but it definitely won't work in a school where there's a lot of ELLs, whether they're in ESL or ELD programs. So I really wanted them to be able to understand what a metaphor was. So I modeled metaphor for them. I gave them a very simple metaphor. Hafsa, the girl in our class, is a fish in the water. This means she can swim fast. And then I translated it for the girls, for all the other students, just so that they could understand what that metaphor was. And we did one together where we drew the sun on the board. And then they had to think of a picture they could compare the sun to. So you're comparing two objects. So we came up with fire, and we said that the sun is too hot. So the sun is a hot fire burning. So what we decided that meant was that the sun is too hot and I'm sweating. And it's one of those hot days. And then the next part of the gradual release is I gave the students 3 pictures, one of snow, one of an ocean, I can't remember the third. And they had to think of a picture to compare it to, and then we created kind of charts where we drew them all together and looked at and discussed and compared their metaphors. And then finally, they did one independently. The independent piece with my Syrian girls, I really had to support them still. They weren't able to do it completely independently, they still needed a lot of support. But they were able to create a metaphor and understand what that word meant. So there you can see how you're getting into higher level thinking. And of course in mathematics as well, we want to reinforce that vocabulary. So here's some examples from a classroom from last year where a teacher created multilingual bulletin boards. So if you have a lot of ESL students in your class, this is not necessarily particular to students in ELD programs, but if you have a lot of ELLs, you can really include them by when you're creating your math bulletin boards, not just writing it in English, but in different